Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bunny Cakes, and if you're new here, welcome to my channel for the first time. Today I am going to be doing a review for I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, both the book and the TV show. So it's a true crime book that was posted posthumously after Michelle passed away. The book was actually completed after she passed away, sadly. And it chronicles her search and the case of the Golden State Killer. He was also known as the original Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist. So this was a really interesting case, because from the onset, the case was just crazy. And for a long time, the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker were thought to be two different individuals. But eventually, some true crime sleuths kind of put it together that they were the same guy. And Michelle got in on the case. She was a true crime blogger, and she ended up getting in on the case, and it became this book that she was working on. This book is probably the best true crime book that I've ever read, and I've read a lot of them at this point. And it's partly because it's about the case, but it's also equal parts memoir about Michelle's journey through tracking down this killer. So while she goes in and she gives details about the victims and she does them justice, and she talks about how the Golden State Killer was terrorizing these communities, and how she's building these relationships with the police and the investigators, and forming these relationships with fellow amateur sleuths and everything. She's also talking about her family and her daughter and her husband Patton Oswalt, and the way it's affecting her. And it's just amazing the way it's written. Like, she had a degree in creative writing, and you can tell because it's written very much like a story. So there's, like, I don't know what the textual version of umami is, but it's like that. There's substance, and it's really good, and you really truly get into it. And like, you feel the fear, but you also feel that anticipation. And she talks about how a lot of the times the people who are tracking down these killers are cut from the same cloth, because they also have that obsessive need to hunt and find their target. And it's really interesting, the way she brings in that psychology and that sort of two sides of the same coin for police and amateur detectives. I think it's also interesting to see how these killers, they don't just affect the victims and the victims' families and the communities. At times, they even affect the detectives, and even years later, the amateur detectives that are delving into this case, because she talks about how she has nightmares, and about how at one point Patton was just trying to wake her up, and she threw a lamp at him because she was in the middle of a nightmare about this rapist. And it's it's just so deep and so real. I absolutely love this book. I definitely gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The parts about her life where she talks about how for the past couple of years her anniversary presents from Patton have been gifts that related to her search for this killer. And it's sweet because it does seem very Patton Oswalt. I believe he is high up on my list of favorite human beings on this planet. And it's so well written. It was finished I know Gillian Flynn helped finish it, and some of the detectives and amateur detectives that were helping her on the case helped finish the book, because sadly Michelle passed away before she could finish the book. They they put everything together towards the end from her notes and from her previous blog posts about the specific killer. And it was, that part is so sad and endearing and just amazing. Now, they did eventually catch, they recently caught the Golden State Killer, which is a term that was coined by Michelle. She didn't live to see it. But it is strongly believed that her book did a great deal to help catch him, because when her book was published, it became this big phenomenon, and it brought eyes on the case again, like wide public eyes, and so in the end she helped catch him. And throughout the whole book, she says multiple times, she says she doesn't care if she's not the one who catches him, just as long as he gets caught. And so I think that that it's amazing that she did in the end help catch this guy, even if she wasn't here to see it. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. Also recently, HBO had a 6-episode series about the book. I think that the series was great, but I think you need to read the book and watch the series, regardless of which order you do it in. And the reason I think that is because they focus on different things. So the book's primary focus is the Golden State Killer. The show seems like its focus was much more of a memoir about Michelle and the things she was going through. You get a lot more detail in that. You see a bunch of text messages and stuff between Michelle and Patton, and Michelle and the people she's working with, and you, there's a trigger warning because you hear part of the 911 call when Patton found her. But you also get a lot more insight into their relationship, and the way they work with their daughter. And I think it's really adorable that even though Patton is by and far the more famous part of the couple, because I mean he's a world famous comedian and actor, he very much took care of her. And like there are some bits where it shows like she wasn't sleeping very well, so when she did sleep, he let her sleep, and he would make a hot cup of coffee for her and leave it on the nightstand and text her and let her know that things were taken care of and all of that sort of thing. One of their anniversaries, I believe, he asked her if she wanted to go out to dinner because he'd made a reservation, and she was busy working, so she said, no, I just want to eat in and I need to work on this. And he's like, all right, awesome, you know what, whatever. Just as long as you're doing what you're doing. And he's so encouraging to her and everything throughout it. And then, I mean, it was an amazing series. It does go in and it does focus on the crime as well. So you get interviews with the social worker, which is one of the police officers that helped. There's interviews with, Lord, I can't remember his name, but the main detective that wrote the first book about the Golden State Killer before he was called that, and also the lab technicians that helped connect the DNA and everything. And you do meet and talk to some of the victims, and their stories and the way their lives have turned out afterwards are just so poignant and interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things is that towards the end, they have this meeting of all the surviving victims of the East Area rapist, and well, the Golden State Killer is the easiest way to speak of him. And he attacked mostly couples, especially towards the end. And it turns out that literally only one couple stayed together, and you get to talk to that husband, or well, you don't talk to him, but they talk to him, and you hear some of his experience. And there's one part where the husband and wife are sitting there, and she looks at him and says, you know, I think you handled it better than I did. And he says, no, I didn't handle it better, I just handled it differently. And he tells the story. He's a lawyer, and he said, a few years after, he was defending his client, and this prosecutor had effectively called his client a liar, and he jumped up and slammed the guy against the wall and was like ready to fight, because he felt his client wasn't being taken seriously. And like, I mean, these people definitely have signs of PTSD, but it's interesting, as somebody who has dealt with things like that, to see somebody talk about it like that. And it's so amazing to me that that couple went through something so traumatic, and they're still together, because so many times, and even just looking at the victims in this case, no one else stayed together because the trauma was just too much. And I think a lot of it was the guilt and the rage and the anger that the men felt, especially because they couldn't protect the women in their lives, and sometimes, in some cases, their children too, because several of the couples actually had young children that were in the house while this happened, and they slept through it. Mostly, there were some of them who didn't. And so, yeah, I think the book and the TV show are both amazing. 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend both of them. But like I said before, I recommend that you do both, because you get a much more rich and full story when you get both the book and the TV show. There's in the book, there's a foreword by Gillian Flynn where she talks about how she got involved and how she met Michelle and that sort of thing. And the afterword is by Patton. And they're both really good. The afterword by Patton made me tear up quite a bit. But not nearly as much as the bits of Patton in the show. Because you see him, there's interviews, with him, because the show was made well after Michelle's passing. And he talks about how he had to break the news to his little girl, and how his daughter's preschool dean or principal or whatever had advised him not to tell her the day it happened, but to tell her in the morning so she heard it in the sunshine. And I think that's a really good thing, so that she didn't have to go to sleep and have those nightmares, or possibly have those nightmares, especially for this little girl who had trouble with nightmares anyway. And then you also see at one of the book signings at a convention, Patton is there, and Michelle's book agent or literary agent is there, and many of the victims are there and everything. And the victims are telling Patton, they're so glad that he's there. And like, he kind of tears up a little bit, and he's like, I wish Michelle could be here, because this is hers. And I think one of the other things that was so amazing about this show is it explored the way it affected Michelle so much, because she was definitely taking a lot of sleep medication, like Xanax and opioids, and there's they kind of talk about maybe there was some addiction going on, because there were there was an addiction problem in her family. And so Michelle did overdose, and she passed in her sleep. Um, and so it's one of those things that you just don't think about, how deeply writing and walking into that level of darkness affects regular normal people. um, and I think it's so sad that Michelle won't be able to write another book, and that she didn't live to see the good she had done. um, and that her little girl is going to have to grow up without her. And sadly, that Patton has to continue on without her. Now, I believe he has since remarried. Um, but you can tell in this series that he'll always love Michelle. Not that he can't love his new wife too, but that he'll always love her. And that her little girl loved her too. And she seems like she was one of those people that never really met a stranger, which I think is great. I kind of wish I had known more about her while she was still living, because I've gone back and read some of her true crime blog, and it's amazing as well. She was an amazing writer, and I would have loved to have seen more from her. But regardless, even if you're not typically into true crime, I think you'd probably like this, because it's not written in that dry investigative manner that a lot of true crime is. It's real and it's deep, and you feel that experience in a way that I've not gotten in a lot of true crime. Um, so yeah, I highly recommend both the book and the show. 5 out of 5 stars for both of them. Um, and yeah, thank you, Michelle, for doing this, even though you won't ever see this, and Patton and Jillian and everyone who participated in this. Thank you for making this happen. It was an amazing experience, and also for those of you watching, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.